My girlfriend of 3 years is the kind of person that's scared of everything. Darkness, scary movies, clowns. I'm always reminded of Courage the Cowardly Dog, but without the courage. So when she called me crying last week, I brushed it off as another silly little spook. Her dad came here to the States after a nasty divorce from an abusive mother, and returns back to Europe each summer to visit family and friends, sometimes leaving her alone to take care of her overactive Chuck, a little brown pup that resembles a woodchuck. I've never seen one, so I take their word for it, hence the name. They live in a little townhome with a small backyard, half of which is a wooden deck that steeps down to concrete. It was here when the dog first acted strange, growling and making a racket. Over the phone, she tells me how she's woken up by Chuck every morning around 4 to feed him. After that, she lets him go outside to pee and she makes some breakfast. She tells me that a few minutes after letting him out, she hears growling and goes outside to check. This is where I had rolled my eyes. She says she freezes and looks up to barely make out what looks like a head in the dark morning air, humming like a bee and darting from one corner of the small yard to the other, just a few feet above and in front of her face. At this point, Chuck had run between her legs and she grabbed him and sprinted inside. I'm used to hearing her tell me about how she thought she saw this or thought she felt this so many times. But I'd never heard anything where she actually had seen something. Now, me being one who doesn't believe in ghosts and the like, I did my best to try to calm her down, showing her pictures of these remote control helicopters people fly around, and explained to her how it was probably just someone pulling a prank on her or being a creep. She wasn't listening, but it did help, and she was far more stable as the sun had come out. And that was that. Now that brings us to tonight. It was our first 4th of July together, as she had gone with her dad the past few summers. So I had gone over after breakfast to do the usual and head out with friends for the day. Usually Chuck was right there at the door, jumping all over me and running over with excitement. But not today. I asked her where Chuck was, and she said that he'd been playing in the backyard since this morning. I took a quick peek and saw that he was just standing there with his head low to the ground, shoved right into the corner of the house on the wooden deck. I called him a few times before he brought it up and realized who was there, and then he came back to the house as his usual self. "Is he all right?" I asked. She looked puzzled. "Yeah, he's fine. Why?" I just brushed it off and joked. "He just wasn't there at the door today." We went about our business and went to kill some time. And we watched a recording of Stay on HBO or something before we headed out for the day. I was slightly distracted the whole way, though, by Chuck scratching the wooden deck, as the couch we laid on was a wall away from the backyard. When it was over, I called Chuck inside. The next thing I heard was the familiar thud of a puppy running down the stairs. We saw fireworks and said goodbye to our friends rather quickly, since we can't really leave the dog alone for too long without it tearing up the carpet. We got back to her place at around 10, and Chuck was at the back sliding door scratching at his doggy door. He had closed on the way out. "Hey, can you let her out? I gotta pee too," my girlfriend said, I told her okay as she closed the door to the bathroom and I opened the door to the yard. Immediately, the dog went right to the same corner that it had started at this morning. I waited and had a smoke in the dark. I stared at that goddamn thing through the whole cigarette. It had not moved a muscle. I let the butt fall from my hand, meaning to step out of the way, but it fell through the small gap in the deck. Shit. I still don't know why I crouched, I just did. The next thing I know, Chuck shoves his face right under mine, startling me and sniffing me like a goddamn bomb dog. Then he started fucking growling in the creepiest way. I've heard him growl at other dogs before, but even that sounded playful. I can't even describe how it sounded like. I just knew in my gut that something was up. My first thought was some rodent under the boards. It wasn't a rat. Chuck started barking towards the house, and I heard a humming. It was kind of like a ton of bees, but a more fast and humming sound. Periodically, there'd be some rustling of dirt, and then a little rumble from Chuck. I, however, was frozen. Bam! The board right where I stood smoking was slammed by the fucking thing below. Chuck started barking and backing up to his flap door into the house. That made the thing pissed, and it smacked more boards closer to the house before I heard it thump on the part of the house under the deck. At this point, I realized it was between me and the house. I did not want to be on this deck anymore. I started stepping down to the concrete and the thumping stopped. At this point, I realized the only light was coming from the house and I was standing in the darkness. Bam! I jumped and tripped, falling right on my ass as that thing pounded away at the steps. I wanted to get the fuck out. The adrenaline was pumping and I couldn't think of anything but back away, back away, back away, until I felt the wooden fence on my back and I saw the steps cracking and splitting a few feet in front of me. Bam! Another one, and I hear the humming again. Bam! This one breaks the panel on the back of the step in another place, angling it out a little bit. Bam! Finally, it opened enough space to shove fingers out. But those aren't fingers. It pushed the loose boards open with a pop and a crack, revealing a black hole for it to crawl right through. Those fingers? They weren't fingers. They were its legs. Small and skinny like a spider, but I could tell even in the little bit of light that they were more fleshy and bony. It moved methodically and carefully, with a sort of stubble covering its body that I swear vibrated the air. I knew it saw me, but I could not see its eyes or face. With every step, its long legs got closer, and I can feel my hands go numb, and the blood rush from my face. It started clicking. If you ever heard a woodpecker, it sounded like that, and shook a little for each click. I kept comparing this thing to other animals because it didn't seem like it was from this world. It didn't belong here. It belonged in some fucking story you tell your kids when you want them to stay in bed. What happened next seemed like an eternity. It had crawled its way out and began to rear up by clicking even faster. For a second, I swear it looked like a floating head. But when its legs spread out and open, I almost caught a glimpse of what you could call its face before it was silhouetted by the light from the house. As I recall this, I now realize how truly close this was to me at the time. If I extended my leg, I could have easily touched that thing. The backyard light turned on and there was a scream, This snapped the thing back into its crawling state, and it scrambled to get away from the light with terrifying speed. The sound of it scratching on the concrete and crawling its way over the fence still makes me cringe as I type this. I was in shock, and it took me a few seconds to realize that my girlfriend was the one at the door sobbing and in hysterics. We both went inside and into her room with Chuck, locking every single door and shutting every window to that house despite this heat. For a few hours, we heard that clicking sound outside. At first, only I noticed, but soon she did as it got louder. I looked out the blinds a few times, but never saw anything. As I sit here, typing this at 3 a.m., my girlfriend and Chuck have fallen asleep. But I can't get that image out of my head. I don't think I'll be sleeping at all. Now I will always remember the 4th as the time I saw this thing. And it's out there. I have no idea where, but it is. It hates the light, so it'll be most active at night. I'm posting this to warn others. Be careful. Listen for any clicking noises, quick tapping, or scuttling, and watch your pets. If they act strange, it could be around. I know this all sounds crazy, but please listen. I just hope someone catches this thing soon. Update. Fuck. If anyone's reading this, it might be the last time you hear from me. A minute ago, Chuck's ears perked up and he began growling at the window. Next thing I know, that fucking clicking and that thing is tapping around on the window. The blinds are shut. We have the lights on, so it might know we're here. Plus that tapping, it's getting a little louder now. I'll update soon, hopefully. Update 2. It finally stopped. I waited a few minutes to even move and finally had the nerve to check the glass. You can tell it was tapping and even putting a small crack into that glass. The thing that's bothering me most is that we're on the 2nd floor and it's a straight drop to the backyard from this window.